we're going to go ahead and get started here. Hello, welcome to choosing the right ELN for your lab. Really appreciate you attending today, or of course, listening to this recorded version afterward. My name is Bernie Lee. I'm a product manager here at LabKey Software, and one of my responsibilities includes the governance of our ELN. Today, I'm gonna try to offer some guidance about ELN products and vendors, how you can prepare yourself to make the best decision for you. We are going to focus today on a number of topics, starting off with understanding the importance of an ELN, what some of the differences are between their variations, of which there are many, identifying some key features and requirements, and then eventually how to go about actually making an informed decision. I have a couple of polls which I find fun throughout this presentation, so I'll invite you to respond through Zoom, and at any point in this presentation, please submit any questions that you have. And at the end, I will make time for as many of them as are asked. So thank you so much. All right, I'm going to give you the 2-minute introduction to our company. LabKey Software has been around for 20 years. We've been partnering with a wide range of research organizations during that time, and provide an array of data management solutions, again, including an ELN. We emphasize a genuine partnership with our customers, which is enabled by significant scientific and technical experience across a variety of fields. Our account managers and client services team generally work very closely with you, to ensure client goals are achieved. And then we stay close, seeking feedback and engagement, to help shape our offerings, to help you adapt as your needs change, so that we can grow with you and you can grow with us. I personally got my start at LabKey in that account manager role, because my education, graduate work, and professional work experience are all in life sciences and translational research. For about 8 years, plus doing a lot of that technical data management for the groups I was involved with. So that's just a little bit about us, and let's jump in to get on the same page to start with. I definitely like to line up definitions a little bit, and it's worth doing with electronic laboratory notebooks, which I'm going to mostly just refer to as ELNs from here on out. It's kind of a mouthful otherwise, but an ELN comes in a variety of forms. In general, as well as in its most basic form, it is really meant to replace paper notebooks, while offering many digital advantages. Obviously, in simple terms, that allows you to capture protocol and experiment information, which ultimately improves things like reproducibility, traceability, accountability, organization. Also, doing so fastidiously reduces the risk of losing knowledge, losing data from researcher turnover, from staff turnover, and ultimately can improve collaboration with your team and with others. And in addition, not to be overlooked, it has the effect of improving oversight of processes by various concerned leaders. When you have to write down everything that you've done and aggregate things in the proper and expected way, it increases accountability. It's good stuff. So there are many ways in which ELNs manifest, and many feature variations, which we will see. But people generally seem satisfied with everything from general notation software like Microsoft Word or OneNote, through specific standalone ELNs, and all the way up to full data management systems built with or on an ELN. So let's walk through some of those distinctions. I won't spend too long on paper, that good old world-changing technology that grows on trees. It is, of course, infinitely flexible and low cost, and can last hundreds of years. But of course, it has zero connection to digital resources like your data, except when staples, tape, and glue get involved. And I personally get enough of that at home with my kids. Also, in order to search those notebooks for what you need, you have to store them and keep them organized. That's rather difficult until we get our own, personal natural language processor and your own chat GPT to train so that it knows, everything that's in your notebooks. Of course, I joke, but you just wait. Cool stuff like that is coming. Anyway, this all puts up, big barriers to learning from each other and learning from your previous work. So then, of course, we move up to the basic text editors, the general notation software. Hey, congratulations, you've gone digital. You get to sit at your computer more, which might not be healthy, but these are definitely low-cost software options that make it simple to read and write. Good stuff. However, they are only as organized as your lab's aggregate file management skills are, or actually perhaps your lowest common denominator. In addition, these options don't have a mechanism built in for signing, authenticating your compositions, which doesn't matter to everyone, but it does matter to most. In addition, the data referenced is captured or stored elsewhere. There's a separation. It's in spreadsheets or some other database, might be in some fancy LIMS that your company bought or built. So you have to work between multiple pieces of software, slowing down the process now and in the future when you need to, go back and generate some report or find previously documented information. Okay, continuing up the sophistication ladder, we have standalone ELN applications. These do have built-in mechanisms for organization. They typically provide ways to search and find what you need, sign-in and authentication. And they require the same computer and IT infrastructure that you need for everything else. There are definitely efficiency gains here because these ELNs help you compose experiment write-ups as opposed to the general writing tools. Very often that's done through things like templating. They also sometimes provide version control for your notebooks, allow you to limit who can author notebooks or edit them after signatures. These are genuinely helpful, but that separation of that data capture and storage from the authorship remains. And this tends to lead to the duplication of data within your institutions. You have some of the data inside the notebook, and you also have the data in some other place. And that, of course, introduces uncertainty about which source is the right one to use or review in the future, or maybe you need both, and what happens when those things deviate from each other. Anyway, let's move to our zenith, I guess. So an integrated ELN. An integrated ELN means that there is no separation between your data capture and storage and the notebooks. They are one software. There are a variety of manifestations of this, everything from capturing data through the ELN as that primary interface to LIMS and other data management systems that have a built-in ELN that's capable of accessing all of that data therein. And with that data being integrated, you can coalesce the LIMS sample-centric data management, including things like inventories and freezers, plates and instrument or assay results, and the analyses with that notebook experiment workflow-centric nature of a notebook, and that's potentially very powerful. I'm going to dive into that a little bit more, but please note that as you climb this ladder, typically the monetary costs as well as the implementation time go up. It's very often worth it, but it does need to be carefully considered as you search for the right ELN. Okay, here's the first poll. I am interested in where you're coming from. What are you currently using, if anything? And a little bit later in this presentation, I'll share the anonymous results with you, as I'm sure some other people are interested. I'll give everyone just another 10 seconds or so to check in here. Really appreciate your participation. Okay, I want to dive a little bit deeper into that top one, into the benefits of the integrated ELN. Since there are many, and there are a variety of manifestations of this. So, the integration of these scientific data management and ELN components means that you have a centralized source of truth for your data and information at your organization. You don't need to spend hours or days searching, for all of the times that you ran a certain protocol, and then go to search for and export each of those pieces of associated data, and then aggregate them and redo some kind of analysis to generate some report, and then put them in a PowerPoint or something. That's a lot of time. Instead, with these integrated systems, you can simply go find the notebooks for that protocol, or and have all of the data present there, all of the analyses present there, or on the other hand, you can go and find the relevant piece of data, or say all of the data that you have for a particular antibody or whatever it is that you're working on, and have and see all of the notebooks associated with it, and you're just done. Or in fact, better yet, the person asking you for this new analysis or report can simply go look at it on their own, because it's organized and they have permissions to do so. So that's centralization. So data integrity, as I mentioned on the last slide, when you coalesce the different data types and unstructured information, and that's bundled with the security, the data backups, the version control that you get with a lot of these systems, you get much more complete traceability and provenance of all of the information that's in there. Much of this comes from reduced data capture steps, reduced duplication of data, and the ability to impose standards on what's captured when and in what form. All of this together gets you, better support for things like fair data principles, better organization, better accessibility, predictability. Boy, do not undervalue predictability. Then there's streamlining workflows, being able to move faster. This really comes from having your data while you work, having your data where you work. You don't have to move information between systems back and forth over and over again, and making sure you get the right versions, or even use more than one piece of software. You can just take the steps you need in one place. Much smoother. Many of the same benefits ultimately mean that you can scale up more easily. So if you're growing, you're adding people, you're adding operations, data types, types of experiments that you're performing, more operations, more complexity. It's simply easier to expand when everyone knows where to go for their data and analyses, where it's expected, having one system that can accommodate it all, knowing where all of those write-ups go and in what form, and it's one place. So new teams with new data needs can simply be plugged in to what's there. And then lastly, there's enhanced collaboration, which really kind of follows suit with the last couple. It's just easier to point someone to the relevant data and reports when it's all in one place, or when more than one person is contributing to the same piece of work. You can both just plug into the same place. No one has to go searching for files or where some past employee stored and named something. Okay, that's like kind of feels like a lot, but so if I have to distill down to a singular benefit, what comes from these, it's something like you get to your science faster and more reliably. You get to focus on the thing that you actually care about, instead of a lot of these other tasks that are or should be secondary. Okay. Now that you have a better grasp on what distinguishes the various tiers of ELN, it's time to start figuring out how to choose one. So choosing the right ELN, it certainly depends on your needs and resources. So, this problem begins with identifying your existing and prospective pain points. On this slide, I have some categories of pain points. These aren't even necessarily specific ones, but I have some categories of pain point listed here. And you will surely think of more for yourselves. But I want to walk through a few of these that I've chosen. So the first one's organization. Are you having trouble keeping track of and finding previously written up notebooks and protocols when you need them? That's an organizational issue. Or perhaps it's a little bit more about consistency as you scale. Everyone, performing similar work writes them up so differently that making use of notebooks is onerous, time consuming, and absolutely dependent upon the original person that did the work. Or standardization, like do your protocols, SOPs, do they sit in some shared drive totally disconnected from the documentation of their execution? Would it be very helpful to have the ability to track which protocol or template a particular piece of work is based upon without having to follow some esoteric naming convention? And then there's process adherence. Maybe if you're unlucky, many of your researchers and technicians have, say, 90% of their notebooks from the last month unfinished or unsigned or unreviewed or something like that. And you could use help encouraging completion to stay more on top of things. In a system where it's clear that you can see the value when you complete these things and when you follow the protocol, like that's a lot easier. And there's scalability, which I mentioned, of course, a little bit previously. But it's just like, is the sheer number of people and notebooks for you getting so large that you are going to have your own, miniature library here soon with nothing but notebooks in it? One other category that definitely drives people, drives people a little bit crazy is, new regulatory or business compliance needs. That can be a real challenge. But a lot of them can be solved through, quality software help. Again, you can most assuredly think of more categories of pain point, as well as ones specific to your operation. I would strongly encourage you to write all of them down in conjunction with input from your other colleagues that are ultimately going to be involved. So based on those pain points and your goals, you're going to want to establish requirements for use in your assessment. So these are criteria that your people can use internally to help guide a decision based on what you're learning, as well as guidance for vendors, so that they can show you the parts of their products that you actually care about. Because, of course, many of these sophisticated products are incredibly wide-ranging. You want to see the things that you actually care about. So this is conceptually simple, but can be hindered by difficulties making institutional decisions. So you really want one driver of the information gathering and the communication, and as well as a final arbiter, someone to make a decision when the inevitable disagreements arise. If you lack these things, you could very much find yourself in a sclerotic mess, difficulty actually making a choice, and ultimately maybe not making one and having spent a lot of time exploring without any of the fruits. Okay, so what do you want to know, and from whom? So whatever teams and groups with varied interests, needs, pain points will be using the product, they should have input. At very least, that's someone to synthesize and communicate the needs to the people who are actually doing the assessment of various ELN offerings. You want to know what processes could be improved, what future demands are coming, what do they aspire to do, how will their group actually use the software. These investments in something like an ELN or other data management software tend to be quite long term, say 5 to 15 years. or more if you choose well. So it's worth taking a little time to speculate on the future as far as you can. Then you also ought to be thinking about your data. What structured data do you have, if any? What information do you need to manage and share? What do you want to do with that data after it's in the system? That could be samples of materials, results in files, protocols and SOPs, etc. And in what form does this data take? And how do you want to store it, use it, relate it to other things? Some of these questions can be difficult if you aren't used to solving data management problems. Do your best, of course, but then let vendors help you. This is their expertise. They really can provide some healthy guidance. Think about whether everyone should be allowed to see everything in the system, or whether you need permissions, you need silos for specific reasons. You're going to want to convey that to vendors as well, so they can show you how that would work with their tools. And if you happen to have them, what do your information technology, cybersecurity teams have to say? They may have some very clear guidelines for you that might limit your choices. This is really important to know up front. And perhaps more importantly, they will be able to help you assess the technical quality of some of the products that you explore. Maybe you do not have this specialization at your organization. And if that's the case, by the way, I think you should be primarily looking for, or exclusively looking for, cloud-based solutions. You can take advantage of the technical capabilities of the vendors. And last but most certainly not least, what resources do you have to wield? These systems range from free or marginal cost, up to 5 or 6 figures, depending on the scale and sophistication of the software and your organization. But that's not all. It's likely to take weeks, sometimes months, to get systems implemented, again, depending on the sophistication and scale, the intended usage of the software. And then a lot of people need to ramp up on its usage. Can you afford all of that? If not now, when? If never, then there are alternatives that are probably worth exploring. Okay, I see that someone asked, if we could make this presentation available to review at a later time. Yes, we certainly will. Thanks for attending again. Okay, next poll. Now that you have a better understanding of what you may need, or have started to contemplate it a little bit, hopefully, tell us why you're looking for an ELN. Yeah, what is driving this interest in a solution like this? And again, I'm going to share both of these at the end, so we can examine them a little bit together. And then we're going to dive into features, security, vendor quality, and then ultimately decision making. Okay, time for some more specific guidelines, I guess, buyer guidelines. I've chosen a few features to highlight in this section to think about, but there are, of course, many more. My hope is that at least some of these you haven't thought of, or anyway, they're worth considering. Hopefully these groupings will give you a little bit of a better sense of what's on the ELN market. There's some basic features that I think you will want at a minimum, in addition to the presumed text editing capabilities that will come along with these. First one I mentioned before is templates. They're a feature that allows you to pre-construct commonly written notebooks or protocols. The alternative, of course, is composing each from scratch, or more likely, saving text files on your personal computer, to copy and paste from. So this one's a really big time saver. You want the ability to include data in your notebooks in some form. You want the ability to handle images and other files that need to be associated with your workup. Notebook organization, you're going to want some ability to organize and categorize your notebooks, and along with that, of course, a mechanism to find those notebooks after the fact in the system. And at a minimum, you want to be able to use this ELN on your personal computer. And that would be just fine if it were just, the individual computers of the users involved. However, I'll touch on this a little more later, but, I would advise an internet browser-based product because it provides you online access. There are many other features that bolster the utility of an ELN. I'm going to walk through a couple. We could debate what's basic, what's advanced, but I've listed a few here that I would consider to be more advanced. I'll try to justify that a little bit. So having actual review and electronic signature mechanisms is obviously critical for some people, for some scientific endeavors, but actually totally useless for others. In some scientific endeavors, submitting completed notebooks for review and locking those down in order to protect the contents is kind of the whole point. But we have plenty of ELN users that never use the mechanic. For them, it's just processing a workflow, working through a protocol, and the signature part isn't that important. Some ELNs provide mechanisms for communication within a notebook. This is really quite a nice to have feature. Especially when you have co-authoring. So co-authoring, which is like being able to jointly or even simultaneously write up your contribution to some lab work. Having each of the authors concurrently being able to write up their portions, it prevents there from being 2, 3, 4 notebooks all for the same work. They need to be reviewed and organized separately. And we see a lot of that. I think that co-authoring paradigm really matches what is very often done in lab for a lot of operations, for a lot of sciences. But it's just not supported by a lot, maybe even most ELNs. So when it is, you can imagine the value of being able to comment and communicate, within the document, being able to message each other during the process. Notebook sharing. Can you simply take your composition and proffer it to your regulatory affairs department for their composition for an FDA submission? Can you send it to a colleague or a collaborator in a complete form that they can extract what they need from it? This is really nice to be able to do. Some ELNs make that easier or harder. Certainly worth exploring. In a more sophisticated search and find, yes, being able to just type something in that has text, and finding the notebooks that contain that phrase or that title. Yes, those things are really important. Being able to find things based on author, composition, date range, whether they contain certain pieces of data, makes the retrieval of information a whole lot easier. So how would you like to be examining some set of samples or a particular molecule in your lab, or a particular subject or that you're working on, and simply be able to see all of the notebooks that involved it. That's kind of what we're talking about. And I already made this recommendation earlier, of course, but the really nice thing about having an online internet browser-based ELN is that you can do your write-ups from anywhere. Being forced to do that from a specific anchored point in your lab, not as good. Okay, really quick pro tip on this. As you make your lists of features that you want, of abilities that you want to be able to have, separating critical must-have features from the nice-to-have ones can be incredibly valuable. As I said, ELNs come in many varieties, and some of the features you expect to have are going to be missing from some, but not others. And if you like a product a lot, but it's missing one of the things, it would be really good to easily determine that you can tolerate its absence or not. This also allows vendors to tell you when they are not a good fit or not. If it turns out that there are several critical features that they don't have, but a bunch of your nice to haves are present, they can tell you that, and you can make the right choice for both of you together. Okay, Security. We cannot neglect security. So security risks, right after recommending online tools, security risks are probably the main disadvantage of online tools. Obviously, we all use them anyway, but you certainly want to mitigate the risks. And again, you may have strongly established institutional policies in this regard, which can make your selection process easier, or actually, I should say, filtering down to the ones that will fit easier. Some institutions require, for example, that software be on their infrastructure, behind their firewalls, on their hardware, and plenty don't. But there are vendors that exclusively offer software as a service, which is fine. No judgment there. It's really good to know your rules and understand the trade-offs of letting vendors provide versus supporting these things yourself. This is actually where I'm going to add one more quick pro tip, which is quality vendors, quality software development must emphasize security in their processes, in their software development, or trust in them would rather quickly be lost as security breaches would pile up. So you can ask these vendors about their approaches, but most, frankly, are quite good at this. And so when you can, let them do your security work for you. Use their secure infrastructure if you can. I know lots of people can't, but if you can, it's a good deal. Roles and permissions. Do you need controlled access? If the system is going to be a central source of truth for your data, are there functions that you only want certain people to be able to perform? Trusted actors with greater accountability? Maybe not, but it's important to have have that clear and to evaluate these controls on the software you consider. E-signatures and locking notebooks, kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, but if your data record is partially or completely these notebooks or the data that is contained in the system, it is a security concern to have them remain editable. So talk through the details of what you need, what is your true record, and make sure that you have the features you need in order to protect that. Okay, a little more on compliance with federal and other regulations. Lots of groups, need GXP compliance, 21 CFR Part 11 compliance. Specific business rules that your institution may have imposed. Or perhaps it's actually based on the way that you construct your contracts with clients. It's going to be really important that all of these things that you need to comply with. Make sure that the software that you're using allows you to comply with them. There are a variety of features that support this stuff. For example, version control, edit history, authentication, required signatures, detailed auditing of all actions in the system, and many, many more. Let vendors show you how they help you comply with these things. Then there's the authentication itself. Many institutions require multi-factor authentication, or they want to use a particular single sign-on technology, LDAP, CSO, stuff like that. And then lastly, worth mentioning, you might actually have rules about sharing notebooks. If you don't, at least consider what's the relationship between an exported notebook that you're sharing with someone and the original one in the system, and do you have any way of demonstrating that you have the original and it's unchanged? Anyway, there are many more, but this is another nudge to involve your information and regulatory teams in this process. Okay, choosing the right vendor. This is actually a really, really big one. This is as important, almost as important as choosing the right software itself. And of course, in reality, you can't really separate them. So, remember how I said that whatever you choose, you're likely to use for 5, 10, 15 or more years. We're going to talk through this because some of the implications of vendor behavior well, they can be very impactful over that time frame, and that's a rather long relationship to contemplate. Okay, so long-term product viability. If you haven't spent a lot of time in the software industry, lots of products are made use of for a while. Sometimes they are decommissioned. Sometimes they change, and that depends on the vendor that's working on them. So how long has that vendor been in business? What's their reputation like? Mind you, it shouldn't be a deal breaker that a company is very new. They may very well have the best product and service for you, and that's great. But, in general, that remains a decent metric for an initial judgment. Are there regular updates and improvements to the product? Or conversely, is the company simply trying to, maximize profit for work they completed 10 years ago or longer? Also, no judgment there, but it's good to know. And along the same lines, like, would the vendor share some of their plans or a roadmap or something like that? Are they improving and building in ways that are valuable to you, or are they moving away from your use case? Also good to know for that long-term commitment. Can you imagine like making a commitment like that for a decade even, and then having the vendor go out of business or decide to mothball the product that you bought? Anyway, that's unlikely, especially if the responses to some of those questions that I just posed are positive. You definitely also then want to consider what partnership looks like, feels like, what vendor support looks like, feels like. Does the vendor have a demonstrated track record of successful partnerships, or does everyone run away screaming? You can sometimes gauge from their websites, but I recommend requesting referrals. Is the support and cultural style a match for your organization? Think of the difference between a large faceless company that makes it difficult to contact them unless perhaps you're waving more money in their faces, and the smaller organizations that are like seeking to build institutional relationships with you and who care about your outcomes. That produces very different support feels. And again, along the same lines, what is the vendor's approach to troubleshooting and issue resolution? Do you find making requests is just filing things with an apparent black hole and then kind of hoping that you'll get some constructive response? Or do you have a responsive, dedicated contact who clearly makes a competent effort to help you? Big differences, especially over the long term. Then there's scalability again. Is the software scalable to accommodate growing teams and data? Is it built to handle an increasing volume of data and experiments over time? Are there limits on the number of people that can use the software, the number of projects it can handle, the number of entries, the number of rows of data, the large data sets? Are there limits on these things? Of course, only your scale and growth trajectory. But if you share those things and ask vendors to demonstrate that they can handle it, that's a pretty good sign. Then there's pricing structure and additional costs. Obviously, only your budget and the future. But here I'm mainly talking about like, what is the pricing model, including subscription fees, one-time costs? How stable is the pricing month to month, year over year? How much of an increase might you expect in the future? Is there a difference or decrease? Is there a difference in cost for cloud versus on-prem instances of the software? Making sure the things you want are compatible with your financial and legal situation. It really matters. Also, quick note: some companies will negotiate their price instruction, as in they'll present the way that they typically operate, and if it doesn't fit you for some reason, it really won't actually hurt to ask for an alternative arrangement, to propose an alternative arrangement. The worst case scenario is they say, no, we can't do that. Okay. And then lastly on this slide, does your vendor clearly show technical and scientific competence? This is of course relevant because you are scientists seeking a technical solution to a data or information problem. You know, a lack of competence is likely to show in a deep product demonstration, but there are other good ways to assess this. So, you know, can the vendors describe implementation successes, timelines, necessary resources required for you to be successful? You know, do the vendors comport with various best practices for software services? You know, things like disaster recovery plans, system failure responses, stuff like that. Okay. I should move on, but quick tip here is, you know, if the sales process has been valuable to you, and you like the way that you're treated, you have a good cultural fit so far, you know, that probably means that's, you know, probably reasonably represents what the ongoing relationship and support will be like. You know, conversely, of course, if it makes your day much worse to interact with the sales team or the partnership representatives, or they hound you to make a decision faster than you're actually comfortable with, that may be a bad sign for the long-term relationship. Okay, I should move on, but let's quickly look at our poll results before we talk about decision-making and starting your actual search. Okay, so, you know, our first question was, what kind of solution are you currently using? And it turns out half of you are on paper, and the rest is pretty evenly distributed. We certainly have a handful of people who are just getting started. So that's very interesting. I mean, that tells you something. ELNs have been around for a while, but the default is still to start with paper. Fine, but good to know. Let's also look at our second question here. You know, why are you looking for a new ELN today? Obviously, there are more options than what I've listed here, but there are quite a few of you just getting started with an organization. More of you outgrowing what you have, or who dislike the experience that you have with your current ELN, and at least a few of you. I just threw this out here as an example. The NIH put out this data management and sharing policy a few months ago. I can't remember exactly when, but a few months ago, and it has certainly gotten a lot of scientists thinking about these things, which of course we think is a good thing. But it looks like we have a pretty good distribution of some of these responses. So thanks again for participating in that. Okay, making the decision. You know exactly what you want at this point, right? You can articulate it clearly internally into vendors. You've written down all the you know, all of that with distinctions between what's essential, what would be nice to have. You have a couple of options for how to proceed now that you know your own mind. If you have enough resources, you could consider creating your own software solution, or paying someone to make it for you. Yes, this can be incredibly expensive and time-consuming, but it would also be theoretically a perfect fit for you, which again has repercussions for years and years to come. For most, of course, this approach is fanciful, and considering some off-the-shelf product is, you know, whether it's customizable to you or not, is really the right approach. So you will find and research an initial set of products. You know, make sure that the key users and you actually try the top products. I don't mean just get a demonstration. I mean, find a way to have a fully featured version of the software that you can try to get your data into. You can try to author a notebook. You can feel what the review and sign-off experience is like. What's it like to try and find a notebook with critical information in it? You know, and then from that, you should be able to narrow down the field to just a couple of top candidates. Either based on explicit criteria, experience with the vendor, or just the feel you get using the software and whether you like it. At that point, it becomes a lot easier to really discuss with your team the trade-offs of each. And this is the point at which I would strongly recommend seeking those referrals, finding reviews and testimonials. Just like with every other product you might buy out there, you know, your top candidates will not be a perfect fit for everyone. And learning about the real experiences with the vendor that people have is just going to provide you with the best information possible. And then again, make sure your decision is aligned with both current and likely future needs. And then do the work to plan for available resources. Again, those are the people that will be required for implementation and the budget. So how should you get started after this presentation today? No matter what I say, everyone will spend some time with your preferred search engine, and that's of course fine. But the fastest way to get good ELN candidates is by talking to people who have used one or several. Reach out to your connections, get their opinions, ask your team, new hires and veterans alike, at yours and other organizations. They may have a favorite that they believe would be a great fit for you. Also, another good opportunity to consult your IT and informatics teams. If you have a software development team, fantastic. If you have, talk to them for all the same reasons I recommended before. They'll have opinions. They'll have a different perspective on these pieces of software than a lot of your scientists. These are good things to consider. Then ask for demos and recordings of those demos for internal circulation. All right. This is my sole plug for our own products today. If you have any interest in starting off with LabKey, which of course we would love to hear from you, please contact us through our site and set some time. We'd love your consideration. And even if you aren't truly considering us, we'd love your feedback on our products. Thanks so much for listening in today. And I'd be happy to take some questions. I'd be happy to, again, set up some time to talk with anybody who is interested in the future. And yeah, let's take any questions that people have. Oh, good, they're coming in. Okay, yes, I think I already answered the, will a version of this be available for viewing later? Yes, we will record this. We will post this somewhere. Get in touch with us if you would like a view of that directly as soon as it's done. I see a question about discussing costs. Okay, I can a little bit, but I have to do it at a little bit of a high level, which is to say that some of the ELN options, or the things you might use as an ELN, the costs are enormously variable, and many of them. So let me say this: there are standalone ELNs that have a low per user cost, in the say dozens to hundreds of dollars per person. And there are more sophisticated integrated ELNs that do a lot more than just facilitate your notebook composition, that range from well into the several $100s per person kind of range. And some of the pricing structures are more institutionally oriented or project or group oriented as opposed to individual license oriented. Some will do it based on number of notebooks or amount of data. So those pricing structures introduce a lot of variation into these. There are also some that are have free versions, particularly if you're in academia or something like that. Those things are worth exploring, and then of course they will wave in front of your face all of the fancy features that you wish you could afford. So again, I'm happy separately to talk about our pricing, but it's going to range everywhere from cost equivalent to Microsoft Office Suite all the way up to say into the six figures. Okay. How do ELNs accommodate high throughput data? Yeah, great question. So even implied within your question is the fact that the ELN is more than just a notebook composition tool. It's a data management tool, and so each data management tool is going to deal with high volume and high throughput data differently. Some of them are going to be able to automatically consume those data outputs and put them in a form that is convenient for you, showing you showing you chromatograms, showing you calculated averages and peaks, generating visualizations for you, or simply organizing them by the data by run, associating them with samples, and then making available to the user the ability to view that data directly or make use of it in a notebook. It really kind of depends. Others will require you to take manual steps in order to get that data in. Still yet, others will allow you to do some of those actions programmatically, so using code, and kind of everything in between. We'd be happy to talk to you about the way that we do that, but there are a lot of varieties. On the other hand, some of the less sophisticated ELNs simply don't deal with high throughput data. They just don't do it, and so you would need to figure out what you want to do with that high throughput data before it's used in the ELN. In what form do you want it there? Do you want just to attach a file that has some of the high throughput data in it? Do you want some summary information and some visualization of that data and stick it in the ELN? Depending on the level of sophistication that you pursue or you ultimately decide on, those are some decisions that you will need to make. And vendors will usually be pretty forward with you about what scale of data they can handle, and how they recommend you behave accordingly, and then you just get to judge whether that's acceptable to you or not. When you purchase an ELN, do you have to provide your own tablet or computer? Yes. So typically, software vendors will not also provide you with computers, tablets, hardware, but the more modern ELNs are definitely compatible with desktop computers, laptop computers, tablets, smartphones. Let me keep reading here. Thanks for sending in these questions. Really appreciate it. Is there any discussion between vendors of ELNs to create an ELN standard? So if one company should fail, then it would be straightforward to transfer to another one. Boy, that would be fantastic. So that is, short answer is no. That is complicated by the fact that there are a lot of different technologies used to capture, display, make use of the the narrative structure of a notebook, the structured data that you operate on, the way that you handle files and images and things like that. People use a variety of different technologies, and the technologies are constantly changing. It makes it very, very difficult to impose some standard across all current and potential software vendors. These days, I would say, frankly, impossible. That said, some ELNs are compatible with others. And of course, it depends on the level of sophistication and whether they're backed by a particular database or certain technology stack. Most often, if you need to transition from one ELN to another, what you need to do is have an archive of your previous notebooks available to you. They may or may not be able to be put into the new system, at least not in the form natively supported by the system, but you might be able to basically have them in the system as files so that they are still indexed and searchable, even if they aren't part of the the more sophisticated search